Welcome to the Action Network podcast presented by BetMGM. I'm Gilles Gallant, joined by Evan Abrams. Each and every week, he's our research director here at the Action Network. We're going to dive into all the Sunday NFL action in a second here. Brandon Anderson will join us shortly for the hot read. And we've got Patrick Everson. He's waiting in the bullpen. He's going to suit up, give us an update on how Sportsbooks did in Vegas and how things went for this NFL Sunday. But first, Evan, let's talk about Monday Night Football. We've got a doubleheader right off the hop. Saints-Panthers will be the first game. Saints right now are hovering around 3-point favorites with an over-under at 39.5. And we've seen a ton of overs already this week, too. We're going to talk about that a little bit more. But looking into this matchup, I'm a little worried about the Panthers side here. The offensive line issues were a big problem in week one facing Atlanta. There's injuries on defense, too. Now, J.C. Horn is out for a while on injured reserve. On paper, Evan, this feels like a Saints domination. Like, I'm surprised the line is only at 3, but I think Panthers, divisional dog, that's probably why they're going to be lowering that line a little bit as opposed to maybe 4 or 4.5. What are you seeing from this matchup? How do you think this one plays out?
I mean, from a divisional dog point of view, people are agreeing with you. They like the favorite, so they're going the other way. It's like 70% of tickets right now on New Orleans. So I think people are feeling what you're feeling. I think air yards, Derek Carr was number 1 in week 1. He's throwing it all over the place. He looked better than I thought he would in that game, and I think Bryce kind of was what we thought. And I believe I looked up this stat. I don't even have it in front of me, but first overall picks in their second start. We talked about their first start, which was like 0-14. Second start's not any better. So it's still, very low percentage. So I think Bryce might get a little bit better in week 2, but I think New Orleans is probably the better play.
Yeah, and I think if I was to look at touchdowns for this game, because that's usually what I like to bet, although I will say if I had to bet a side on this one, I'd be looking at the New Orleans side if it's going to be staying at -3. But if I'm looking at a touchdown bet for this game, I'm looking immediately at Michael Thomas. He scored 3 touchdowns in 3 games last year, and in week 1, I know you kind of just mentioned like Derek Carr looked better. I thought there were some throws that he completely missed, and I don't think it was the Titans. I thought just some throws that he was just inaccurate. I'm hoping that he cleans that up for this game because, I mean, he looked for Michael Thomas 3 times in the end zone in week 1, just couldn't convert. And again, I mentioned like J.C. Horn is out as their number 1 corner. So I think a lot of the pass catchers for the Saints could have a lot of success in this matchup, specifically Chris Olave as well, and Juwan Johnson, even Rashid Shaheed. He scored a touchdown last week. The other touchdown guy that I would be looking at in this game, though, if I had to bet one for Carolina, it would definitely be Hayden Hurst. He led the Panthers in all receiving categories in week 1, targets, catches, yards, and he did catch a touchdown, obviously. And that's the thing is that rookie quarterbacks, like just the trend is that they kind of are more predictable. Rookies are going to rookie, and they tend to look for their tight ends, right? And, that Saints defensive pressure, especially their defensive line, which was able to really neutralize Derrick Henry in week 1, I think that's going to make Bryce Young to have to make some real quick throws. And if just looking for that safety blanket, I think that's the guy that you want to look at. Did you have any picks or that you wanted for Saints Carolina?
Yeah, so I've been doing the 180 challenge with this. I had Dawson Knox last week. Of course, no touchdown, but he did score today. So maybe that'll start to be a trend. But it's actually funny. I didn't even look at your script. And so I went back to the well with my 180 challenge, which is, about an 18-1 or one or longer touchdown score. I thought about Juwan Johnson, but I went with Hayden Hurst. So 18-1, 2 receptions, 2 targets in the red zone in week 1. Obviously, like you said, scored the touchdown. I think he's going to get the blanket targets from Bryce. So I'm down. I'm in.
Yeah, and I have no play on the total right now at 39.5. We saw a lot of totals this week at just around the 40 range just get demolished. I don't even want to touch a total right now until we look at maybe games next week. But let's talk about 180. Let's talk about the Steelers and the Browns. One team that definitely needs to make a 180 is the Steelers because week 1 was just an obliteration by the 49ers on them. And if we don't see preseason Kenny Pickett in this game, I think the Steelers have no shot. And the sports books right now, we've got it at -2.5 at BetMGM, over under a 38. In that game versus the 49ers, man, he looked like last year. He looked lost. He looked tentative. There was misreads, accuracy issues. Now, some of that you can attribute to the 49ers defense being so strong, but there were plays that he had and he just couldn't make them, right? And Evan, this is more of the funny thing too. Is so last week we were pretty critical of Deshaun Watson just as far as the way he was playing, and got told that maybe we were being a little too harsh. Well, I'm sorry, but if he plays as poorly as he did last week, the Browns just aren't going to be able to move the ball. And now Amari Cooper isn't going to play as well. That's his safety blanket out on the outside. You're going to see a lot more of Donovan Peoples-Jones. And I mean, obviously Nick Chubb is going to get a lot of his carries as well. Are you going to be doing anything for 180 challenge for this? What kind of pick would you see for this game?
Yeah, so I think just overall, the bettors are looking at the under here. 74% of tickets on the under. The under has dropped 5 points, it looks like, 43 to 38 from the look ahead in the opener. I mean, if I was going to pick a 180 for this one, I think the right one would be Njoku. I was looking at Njoku, Elijah Moore, and Jalen Warren, who were around like that 17 to 1 to 18 to 1 range. Listen, I think Njoku's always been the red zone target for Watson. And even last year, 19 to 8 against Harrison Bryant in terms of red zone targets. So I'll give it a shot. I think it's probably a little undervalued at about the 18 to 1, 19 to 1 range. He likes Njoku, so let's do it.
Well, also, too, there's a ton of trends and data that back up Mike Tomlin as a home dog, Mike Tomlin coming off a loss. There's a lot of momentum to wanting to pick Pittsburgh in this spot. And same thing with the over-under. A divisional matchup, you probably will go under, especially with the way that it's trending. But I'm with you on Njoku touchdown, especially because of how he fares in these divisional matchups. So he has 19 career touchdowns. 11 of them are against AFC North teams. Like he has a 40% touchdown rate when he plays against AFC North teams, and that drops to 15% when he's playing teams outside of the division. So, and the Browns, Harrison Bryant scored last week. We did see Deshaun Watson look for the tight end in that spot. And that's why I think you got to do the tight end double on this game. I think you got to look at a guy like Pat Freiermuth as well for the Steelers, because no Deontay Johnson. I think George Pickens, as awesome as he is, you're really going to have one or two shots. And if he scores a touchdown, it'll be spectacular, but you're not going to see kind of like this run and catch type of thing from Pickens. It's probably going to be more passes over the middle, and Pickett has really trusted him, makes up just over 50% of red zone target share with Kenny Pickett at quarterback goes to Pat Freiermuth. So that's Monday Night Football. Now let's talk about Sunday, which was an insane day, man. Underdogs 8-5 against the spread, but only 5-8 to the money line. Still some pretty big dogs came through today. Road teams 12-4 against the spread in week 1, but they dropped to 6-7 in week 2 entering Sunday Night Football. But the totals, to me, is the story, Evan. 12-1 to the over entering Sunday Night Football. The offensive resurgence that we've been begging for finally comes to it. What else did you see on Sunday?
Yeah, not only 12-1 to the over for full game, so even first halves 9-3-1 to the over entering Sunday Night Football, and first half unders were 10-6 last week. So those 12 overs for full game is tied them for the most in any week since 2005. So if we get one more over, it'll be one of the, craziest weeks we've seen in terms of points. And I just think a fun little nugget to just represent how crazy this, like the 1 p.m. and 4 p.m. slate is the 5 biggest public sides. So that was the Giants, Bills, 49ers, Bears, and Bengals, according to the Action Network. Just Buffalo covered. And then a ticket kind of running around right now, which is a special at a sportsbook, which was basically every team in the 1 p.m. and 4 p.m. window to kick a field goal, which was like 180-1 and 200-1. Those hit as well. So there was a ton of points, ton of overs. So interesting, especially after 12-4 for unders in week 1. So just a twist of fortune so far.
Well, as a touchdown bettor, I definitely enjoy this resurgence of offense, just to be able to have some enjoyable games instead of watching inept football. Now, one team that I thought looked completely inept in one half and then completely turned it on in the second half, that is the New York Giants. To me, this is the most top game of the day just because of how fun it was, how silly it was, all the little ripple effects. Giants Cardinals, Giants win 31-28. Cards do cover, but the over hits at the over under of, again, 39.5. But it was just a huge comeback because the Giants are down 20-0 at halftime. They have odds as high as 19-1 on the money line to come back. It's the first time since 1978 that a team has been skunked, just not been able to score points in 6 quarters. And then Daniel Jones and Saquon Barkley just take over and combine for 3 touchdowns.
I don't even know what to make of this game when you talk about like moving forward, right? Like if you're going to like try to take something from the game to try to get something actionable after it. Like again, Giants look so bad, being down 60-0 through 6 quarters. And then all of a sudden the Giants, all of a sudden spark. I think you have to talk about the Saquon injury as well. Right now it's Sunday night. I'm not sure exactly what that looks like. And the Giants are quick, right? They've got to go to San Francisco for Thursday Night Football. They're staying west. So we'll see how that goes. But without Saquon, they're just a completely different team. So, and the one note I got to make, Arizona. So I was reporting some of this for the Action Network. 19% of bets this week, 22% of bets last week. And Arizona covered both games. They're the first team since 2005, 22% of tickets or less to cover both games in week 1 and week 2. So nobody wanted to bet Arizona, and all of a sudden, here we go. Arizona 2-0 against the spread. And hat tip to Stuckey, there is a possibility Arizona goes 0-17 straight up and 17-0 against the spread. We've got to be here for it.
That would be amazing. Again, but they're this type of team. 2 weeks in a row, they come out real strong and they kind of surprise you because I think these teams, they come in there and they take them light. Like New York, they probably looked at their schedule and just thought that's an easy win, and there's so many ripple effects. Like I got Cardinals' worst record. I know guys that have, last winless team, and they're just on their Cardinals because they were probably close to being the favorite on that spot. So yeah, a lot of ripple effects, a lot of fun here. And another game that had a lot more fun too was Chargers-Titans. So one of the games that went to overtime, our colleague Nick Giffen had an overtime parlay ticket with Chargers-Titans and Seahawks-Lions. So again, we'll talk about that more in a second. But Chargers-Titans, Titans win 27-24 in overtime. Again, the over hits over under 45. Chargers again lose as favorites, and the Chargers, man, just charging themselves over and over again. Vrabel now moves to 25-15-1 against the spread as an underdog. Now, this defense, we were talking about the Saints and whether or not, or at least I was wondering, is this the Saints defense that's doing this to Ryan Tannehill, or is Ryan Tannehilling? And right now, even the Chargers defense can make a quarterback like Ryan Tannehill look good because he ran for a touchdown. He looked like an above average quarterback making plays. And again, just not sure if it's the Saints and Derek Carr that are just incompetent. But, the Chargers also have these 7 different players run the football today. Like if Austin Eckler is out, like it's just a crapshoot for picking a running back 2 for player props. Did you take anything else away from the Chargers Titans?
I mean, I had the Titans, so I love the situation. I love the outcome. And again, it's crazy to always look at the Chargers' expectations. So they're 0-2 for the first time since 2017 and just the second time since 2008. And I find that shocking because they just never start this slow. And we always talk about, maybe they fade late and all those types of things, but just a different team in a different type of situation. We'll talk about Kansas City again in a little bit, but they're 2-0. They look awful, and they're leading the division. So who the heck knows with the AFC West? The one note I think that is interesting, Vrabel, 23-22 straight up as a head coach. Minimum 20 games as a head coach in our BetLab system last 20 years. 98 head coaches. Vrabel's the only one over 500. So wow. He is the dog whisperer, and he then tends to do this all the time. So good for that.
Seahawks Lions, another overtime thriller. Seahawks win in overtime, 37-31. You're going to hear this a lot. The over hit, the over under at 47. Lions were 4.5-point home favorites. And Lions games, 6-2 to the over now in September games under Dan Campbell. And as we just alluded to, is a score fest in Detroit. And one of the things I always enjoy now watching Detroit Lions games is the Campbell gamble. It's the 4th down, like where you're like, what are you doing? Oh, it worked. And twice it did not work. They went for it on 4th down 3 times. One of them was very costly. And then also just Jared Goff throwing a pick. We haven't seen that in a long time. He had 384 pass attempts. That was the first interception that he's thrown in that. It was 44 passes short of the INT record that Aaron Rodgers held.
Not only was it a pick, though. Not only was it an interception, it was a bad time for an interception, too. Like, you could have thrown it in the first quarter, and it would have been fine. But that wasn't the time, wasn't the place.
Well, and if you were an over better, I don't think you were really sweating the over, but at the same time, it was very convincing and very relieving when you watch the pick six happen, because then it goes in and then it immediately cashes the over. You still have a ton of game left to enjoy it. Yeah, I enjoyed this game. What kind of trends did you take away from Detroit here? Because Detroit, I'm sure, was a popular pick maybe amongst the public, but I know that amongst a lot of sharp bettors, a lot of people were on the Seahawks to cover and win this outright.
Yeah, I feel like from an action network point of view, everyone was on Seattle. I got 6. Everyone got 4.5, 5. Ended up working out in overtime. Feels like every time Seattle and Detroit meet, it's 1,000 points. I believe the last few years or over the last 5 years, they've met a few times and they've combined for 50 or 60 points in each. So that's definitely something that was talked about entering this. One thing I feel like that's interesting, this is probably one of the biggest Lions games at home in terms of
that's true. Yeah.
Situation. Like they were just coming off the Kansas City win. So this was just such a letdown in that spot. A fun trend. So Seahawks tend to perform well under Pete Carroll after a home loss. Now 21-11-1 against the spread. And Pete Carroll just in general tends to overperform. His team is 500 or better against the spread as a dog 8 straight years. So they're usually about 500, or he tends to overperform a game or two above. And the one note looking ahead, Montgomery got hurt. Amon-Ra was a bit banged up. And now they get Atlanta. So I believe they're laying like 5 points right now. Atlanta could be an interesting spot coming off a close comeback. We'll talk about it in a little bit.
Evan, more memories are made when you're there for live NFL action. And when you need tickets, our friends at Ticketmaster have got you covered. As the official marketplace of the NFL, Ticketmaster gives you more ways to find your perfect seat. Their interactive seat map gives you a 360-degree preview of your section to make sure you have the best view of those pivotal plays. And if your plans change, Ticketmaster gives you more flexibility to sell or transfer your tickets. Plus, mobile tickets make getting in on game day a breeze, and you can even customize your Ticketmaster app to rep your team's colors. Find tickets today at Ticketmaster.com/NFL. Now time for the hot read from our own Brandon Anderson. He went 2-0 this week by telling you to grab the Seahawks and Chiefs spreads. Brandon, what do you have us looking for at early Week 3 lines?
All right, it's time for the Week 3 hot read. Last week, we had a great start. We're 2-0 on the hot read. We took Seahawks plus 5.5, closed at 4.5. So even with all the Seattle injuries, we still got some CLV. Seahawks won outright in overtime. And then Chiefs, minus 2.5 on the hot read, closed at 3.5. We got past that key number. We got the right side of it. Chiefs won by 8. So we're 2-0 on the hot read. We're getting that closing line value. That's the goal here. Get the line before it moves. So we're going to start out with a little different choice than usual. We're going to Thursday night and taking the 49ers minus 10 against the Giants. Normally, I don't play a lot of high lines, but I think this one's going higher. We got blowout city coming in San Francisco. Last 3 times the Giants played a really good team. Cowboys last week, 40-0. Eagles in the playoffs, they lost by 31. Eagles in the regular season, 26. So when the Giants play real teams, it's not going well for them. When they play the Cardinals, it's not going well for them. They need a miracle half comeback later on in the game just to barely squeak by what we mostly think is the worst team in the league. So I think this shapes up as a huge Niners win. Right now, San Francisco has won 12 straight regular season games. 8 of the 12 wins are by 13 or more. I think that's about where this line's going to end up. We're getting it at 10. So I'm going to grab it now. Giants defense is terrible. They were dead last in DVOA against the run. This is the exact sort of team that the Niners just run it up on. So why now? Why minus 10? We got Saquon Barkley. Looks like I don't think he's going to play in this one. We got an ankle injury, maybe high ankle. We're not totally sure yet. And that line is a mess. Andrew Thomas, the one really good player, was out today with a hamstring injury. The guards are both getting benched and in and out of the game. It's just a really disaster. So no line. Saquon Barkley, we don't know if he's going to play. I don't think he's going to be out there. Take the Niners. Couple Thursday-only trends for you. Underdogs like the Giants, who won by 3 or less the week before, 11-18 against the spread, only 38%. Niners, favorites of 7 or more on Thursday nights, 61%. So I think this gets to maybe 13 by the end of the week. That's a little teaser protection, so you can't tease under a touchdown. Give me the Niners -10. And then we'll go to Sunday. I'm going back to my Atlanta Falcons +5 on the road in Detroit. This one's going to sound a lot like the one we did last week. Seattle at a similar number in Detroit. And I think it's a pretty similar sort of read. Two teams that are pretty close to each other, but the line is too high. And I don't think Atlanta's getting enough respect yet. The Falcons are pretty good. They played the Packers today. They ran 31 more plays. They nearly doubled Green Bay in yards, 12 more minutes with the ball. They only won by one, only at the end. But I think that's mostly because they went 2 of 5 in the red zone. They converted a little bit more comfortably all those field goals, and I think Atlanta's looking a lot better. Bijan Robinson is absolutely electric out there. And Desmond Ridder, slow start, but they got him running the second half. And that reminded me a little bit of Daniel Jones. I know not the highest praise in the world, but I think they found something there. And that defense, they found a little bit too. Lions, I don't know. That defense, bottom 5 last year. I'm not sure they look so improved. We just saw them give up 37 to the Seahawks. And that opening night Chiefs performance doesn't look so great defensively now after the Chiefs only put 17 on the Jaguars. So I like Atlanta here. I think they're just as good as Detroit. And again, look at the injury list. Lions running back David Montgomery, he says himself he thinks he'll be out for a couple weeks with a quad injury. Jahmyr Gibbs, the rookie, he had an ankle injury. Amon-Ra, he was out. He came back in. Possible turf toe. We don't know if he'll go. That's all the weapons on offense. And then the offensive line has a couple injuries. James Houston, very likely the injury news is going to push this line towards Atlanta. So I like the Falcons here at the +5. If you follow me on the Action Network app, I put this in as a bonus look ahead on the money line too, +205. If you haven't played that yet, +180. I like the money line too. I think the Falcons go to Detroit, get the win on the road. So hot reads for week 3, the Atlanta Falcons +5, 49ers -10.
All right, thank you, Brandon. Now let's talk about more games here. Ravens and Bengals. Ravens win 27-24. The over hits. Again, you're going to hear that a lot today. Bengals as 3-point favorites. Looked very disjointed here. And now, since the start of 2021, Lamar Jackson 6-0 against the spread as an underdog. We've seen this movie before. The Bengals go 0-2 to start the season. They've kind of been starting slow. I don't really want to panic yet, but I mean, they play like they lack urgency, dude. I don't know what's going on with Joe Burrow and what they're going on in third down because they were converting, but the Ravens were just faster on defense. It looked like they were actually like trying to win the game. And it's not to say the Bengals weren't trying to win, but it's like there was no battery pack, in their back kind of thing. Right. So Ravens too, they ran the ball pretty efficiently, 5 yards a carry. I mean, they pretty much just bled the Bengals out. And really, Cincy, the only way that they were even keeping this game close, they needed that big special teams touchdown from their rookie, Charlie Jones, to keep it close. So now the Bengals, they got the Rams next week. I mean, they don't want to go into their bye week 4 at 0-3.
I mean, the way I look at it, something's up with Burrow. He 37% success rate, 30th in the NFL, and that's going to be updated after Sunday Night Football, but not great. 6 quarters without a touchdown, and then I think he went 2 to Higgins, basically to kind of get back in that game, but something's wrong. And again, Cincinnati 0-2 for the 4th time in 5 years. Almost feels impossible, but no camp. And, the calf injuries, something feels off. And I think it's 6.5 points right now for the Rams. I believe it's Monday Night Football next week. I feel like the Rams are an interesting spot. I kind of like those points. Anything over 6.5, I think is intriguing. Aside from that, you talked about the Lamar stats. 17-4 against the spread as an underdog or a favorite of 3 or less usually comes through. So all the injuries on Baltimore's side didn't really tend to matter. They stayed in the game. They figured out a way. Zay Flowers also just looks great. It's awesome. Just like so good.
Yeah, Chiefs, Jaguars. Chiefs win 17-9. Biggest total on the board of the week. Public just took a bath on it. The under hits. Chiefs cover as 3.5-point favorites. Mahomes 5-0 straight up, 4-1 against the spread now in his career versus the Jaguars. And I got a bone to pick with the Jaguars, man. They blew this game. Like they had so many opportunities. They could not convert off that muff punt. And then they take that complete chicken shit field goal at the start of the fourth quarter. And instead of being like, they went to 14-9 instead of trying to tie the game. And the Chiefs immediately come down and get a field goal. And it was just like, you knew it was inevitable. You can't give Mahomes chances. I mean, the first half was a slog. Neither team could really get anything going. But I don't think this was a good day for Trevor Lawrence for his MVP campaign.
Wasn't good for either team. The offense looks wrong in both places. 82% of tickets was on the over. I believe it was the most public over of the day. And guess what? The one game to go under. So much fun. Such a great situation. Jacksonville, no touchdown, 20-1 hits. Mahomes, 27-18-1, road neutral against the spread, so tends to cover better on the road than he does at home. And just a fun one. If you were watching the game and had Mahomes over passing yards, it hit on the final throw to Sky Moore for 54 yards. So in a game where probably every under hit possible, Mahomes nails it, 305 on the final play.
Well, let's go back and talk about games that went over, such as the Bears Buccaneers. Another game with a very low total, around 41. Game finishes Bucs win 27-17. Now that over, this is the one thing that's a little tricky here because this was almost hilarious to me. Now, I didn't bet the under, I didn't bet the over, but I know if you had the under, you were crushed by Justin Fields' inept ability to know that you don't need to throw interceptions or try to make a play that close to your own territory. And not only that, throughout the game, he was repeatedly just getting crushed in the pocket. Fields now 8-19 against the spread in his career. And again, that pick six in the fourth quarter was just a backbreaker. Also, another thing that I have a bone to pick with, Baker Mayfield was making a play near the end of the first half. Again, another gripe if you had the under. Quarterback is extending for first down. I think it's fair game to hit a quarterback out of bounds, when they're reaching the ball to try to get it past the line. I think it's fair game to knock him out, kind of thing. And anyway, the Bears got a stupid penalty on that. It put the Bucs at the 7. They score a touchdown immediately from there. So again, just a lot of disappointment, but sometimes maybe just jubilation and laughing at Justin Fields continue to make mistakes.
Yeah, Bears just lose again. It's just every week you just continue to extend the streaks. It's just bad. Fields 3-20 straight up as an underdog in his career. It's the worst of any quarterback in the last 20 years. And you just think you talk about the funny stats when it comes to Fields preseason and all the hype. And again, just looked awful in week 1 against Green Bay, but he was second most bet player to win the MVP when the season started. Everyone was on the hype train. And then I think the biggest issue when you talk about, it's not even just the offense, trying to get, figured out DJ Moore and, different situations there. The biggest issue is the defense. So causing no turnovers this year, Baker Mayfield, no interceptions. And it's just, you're not causing any turnovers and Fields is turning over the ball. It's just a bad recipe.
All right, let's now talk about Packers, Falcons. Falcons win 25-24. The over does hit, but what a silly ending to the way this went. The Falcons were trailing 24-12 entering the fourth quarter. So I was this is one of the games, you're watching, 8 games at a time. I would probably say this is the one that I probably was watching the least during the 1 p.m. slate. And I tried to watch as much as I could, but I was just all right, well, the Falcons, they're probably done now at this point. Anyway, but still, Matt LaFleur, 15-4 against the spread as an underdog for his coaching the Packers in his career, 3-0 with Jordan Love. Now, I will say, because you've been bringing up first half results and totals, I did see one of my buddies, he was on the first half over, and Younghoe Koo misses the extra point just before the end of the first half to swing the total. I just felt so bad for him.
It's just such an odd situation when, all right, so I had a lot of money on Atlanta. I liked Atlanta this week. I had the money line, certain things like that. They made the big comeback. But it's weird to say going forward, I felt better about Green Bay and their offense and the composure of Love than I did about Ritter. Ritter looked bad at certain times in the game and just feels a little bit lost. I think we have to continue to say the stat just because it's fun. He's 30-0 at home, straight up college and pros. So, just a fun trend to put out there. But I think overall, played really bad. And Atlanta, again, goes on the road next week in Detroit. Detroit's without Montgomery and, coming off, a really hard-fought game, overtime, injuries. Atlanta, getting a few points might be good, but I like Atlanta this year, and Ritter just looks really, really bad. So
the Action Network podcast is presented by BetMGM. Use bonus code ACTION when signing up to get $1,500 paid back in bonus bets if your first bet loses. This applies for new users in Arizona, Colorado, Illinois, Indiana, Iowa, Louisiana, Maryland, Massachusetts, Michigan, New Jersey, Ohio, Pennsylvania, Tennessee, Virginia, West Virginia, and Wyoming. Terms and conditions apply. Must be 21 or older. Gambling problem? Call 1-800-GAMBLER. All right, Evan, let's wrap this up. 49ers, Rams. 49ers win 30-23. The Rams do cover, but the over hits. And this is just a bad beat if you took the Niners because the Rams come down. Sean McVay had the Rams. He clearly bet the Rams. Rams come down with a late field goal. Brett Maher, of all people, we saw what he was doing with the Dallas Cowboys last year. He hits a field goal in the closing seconds. But, Evan, I think the 49ers, they just got too many weapons. Like Debo makes 3 guys miss. They score a late touchdown. And another special note, Puka Nacua, no touchdowns, but did break the record for most catches ever in the first 2 games of his career with 20. I want to talk about Commanders Broncos. We'll talk about this one just a little bit more because the ending of how this went. So again, Commanders went outright as underdogs. Over goes way over. I don't think friend of the show, Anthony DeBundo, who was on this, I don't think he was on the under. I don't think he was anticipating the emergence of like Jaleel McLaughlin and Brandon Johnson, who has 2 touchdowns, has that crazy Hail Mary touchdown that puts the Broncos in position to be able to get that 2-point convert. This game to me, Broncos were up 21-3 with 6 minutes to go in the first half. Russell fumbles, and they proceed to get outscored 28-3 the rest of the game, or 28-10 rather, after that Hail Mary touchdown. And then Raiders-Bills. Bills win 38-10. Not really much to take away from this game other than the Bills just did what the Bills were supposed to do because Jimmy Garoppolo, he's 16-7 straight up, 18-5 against the spread as an underdog in his NFL career, and that don't matter because if Josh Allen and the offense is just cooking, the Bills will just destroy them. And then also Damian Harris, he did score with 5 minutes to go to seal the over of 47 with the final score of 38-10. So if you had the over, that Damian Harris touchdown was so clutch. Colts Texans. Colts win 31-20. Texans were this game flipped throughout the week. Colts were favorites at one point, then the Texans closed as favorites. The over under at 39.5. Colts offense is pretty much just Anthony Richardson now. 2 quick scores in the first quarter, and then got a concussion on the second score.
Yeah.
So more Gardner Minshew, I think, and honestly, I'll let you kind of comment on this. This is kind of why I think dual threat quarterbacks don't last.
Yeah, I think it's a tough spot as well. So Minshew 1-10 straight up in his last 11 starts. He's 8-16 straight up as a starter. Doesn't tend to put up a ton of points except for a few starts here or there. I just think without Richardson, who had 3 rushing touchdowns in 2 games before the injury, and I believe Ryan Kelly got hurt as well. He had a concussion out for Indy. So just a really, really bad spot next week in Baltimore against a Baltimore team coming off the win. Normally I'd say, okay, let's look to, try to go the other way next week. But I think Baltimore gets healthier, and God forbid they have to face Minshew. I'd probably lay a big number there. So.
Finally, this is probably the stinker of the day because I think we all kind of anticipated what this was going to be, but also at the same time, we just had hope for Zach Wilson and the New York Jets. But the Cowboys win 31-10 over the Jets. The over hits because the total was at 38.5, and the Cowboys cover because they were -9, and they didn't have any trouble covering that number because the Cowboys pretty much just picked them apart early. The game wasn't really close. If you thought Zach Wilson was bad or the Cowboys defense was good, this game just reaffirmed it, really. That was pretty much Sunday. Now let's check in with Patrick Everson with Vegas Insider to talk about the latest rumblings in the sports betting capital of the world in Las Vegas. Okay, Patrick, you had boots on the ground today. You were at many different properties and casinos and sports books. What was the vibe? How did the books do overall today for week 2 on the Sunday?
Well, it sounds like it was a good day behind the counter, not so good for folks like us on this side of the counter. The bettors did not have the best of days against the NFL. There were certainly a couple of decisions that fell in favor of the bettors. The Chiefs obviously being one of them. A lot of people expected them anyway to have a bounce back week. Although I did talk with one oddsmaker, Gilles, that said actually the Chiefs was good at their operation, which is fortuitous because generally speaking, the Chiefs was definitely a loser for most sportsbook operators, as a lot of the public was piling on the Chiefs and putting them in their money line parlays and so forth. So just kind of depended on where what book you frequented, I guess. But generally, even beyond that, though, it was a pretty good day for the odds makers. A couple of games that they pointed out that went really well. A Buffalo game was good, they said. They also pointed out, I was going to say a couple of others that an odds maker mentioned to me, 3 of them, in fact, that went well were, term them big winners, Gilles. Titans, Ravens, Seahawks, all big winners. Okay. And with that, this odds maker noted the loss on the Chiefs. He said you can't win them all, but we did really well with those 3, so it took a lot of the sting out of that Chiefs loss. But yeah, Titans, Ravens, Seahawks. The Niners giving up or the Rams getting, I guess, depending on how you look at it, that very inconsequential field goal, except as we know in sports betting, it's never inconsequential, is it? Mm-hmm. Taking the Niners from a cover, and a whole lot of people had the Niners in their parlays and so forth, and just needed a cover there to maybe finish it off or even keep it alive if they were rolling it into the Dolphins on Sunday night, which they probably were. That kick there certainly worked in favor of bookmakers, generally speaking. A lot of people still had Niners and teasers and money line parlays, and obviously it didn't hurt those at all. But it certainly, the Rams getting the, I guess, backdoor cover, if you will, on that final second field goal to, I don't even know why you're kicking it really, but whatever. The bettors have to settle with it. The points count.
Well, I find it interesting that you said that the sports books did well on the Titans, Ravens, and Seahawks, which all came down to overtime games. Well, the Ravens was a one-possession game, but it all came down to just a handful of plays where it could have went the other way for the sports books very easily.
You bet.
One of those games, another game, though, that had kind of a swinging line and odds throughout the week was Atlanta and Green Bay. Talk to me about that situation and how bettors may have fared, but also sports books where you're seeing a line open on one side and then close on the other side with the favorite.
Right. And that got, it jumped the fence, I believe, midweek from Packers favored to Falcons favored. And the Falcons were kind of a sharp play. Well, they were definitely a sharp play this week. And then this morning, I think you saw it, Gilles, this number went up like from 1.5 to 3 this morning. And I think it closed 3 as well. So that surprised me a little bit. And I did have at least one odds maker tell me that was on sharp play that got Atlanta up to 3, or at least sharp play contributed to it. Maybe the public was involved a little bit too. But, Green Bay, even without Aaron Rodgers, I think is a more public team than the Atlanta Falcons. So that was surprising to me. But another thing that surprised me a little, and I guess it was just a matter of when the numbers were at what they were, Gilles, but one odds maker told me this evening that it did not help them at all to have that game fall at Atlanta 1, because you could have gotten, obviously, Packers up to 3 if you'd bet it late. So Packers bettors are going to cash. You could have got Atlanta at -1, or +1, +1.5 early. That's all going to cash. Every bet that was made when the line was at 1 is going to get a refund. Whether it's on Atlanta Atlanta 1, I should say, is going to get a refund. So he said, look, that landing 1 was a really bad result. He said, falling right on the number, we got middled on that, basically. It wasn't even a sided situation. It was more of a middle situation where they're just paying out lots and giving refunds as well.
All right. Well, Patrick, let's get you out of here on this one. We're already looking into week 3. Is there any game next week that has saw maybe some early sharp action, line movement that we need to start paying attention to?
Absolutely. And this probably won't surprise anybody, with the Giants looking awful, dreadful for a half, really for 6 straight quarters, if you want to count week 1, dreadful for a half against Arizona. Okay, they come back and win that game, but they lose Saquon Barkley late to an ankle injury. I don't think we know exactly the status yet, but on a short week, you got to think he's not playing. And I spoke with one on
Niners, yeah.
Exactly, not exactly where you want to go to face that team in San Francisco. So this opened 9.5 Sunday night as I'm speaking to you, and one odds maker told me we got sharp money right away, and we went to 10 right away. So already a double-digit favorite for the Niners off some sharp money, laying the 9.5 against the Giants, who could be shorthanded in this Thursday night game.
All right. Thank you, Patrick. Patrick Everson with Vegas Insider. We'll talk to you next week.
Thank you. Have a great week.
Thanks for listening to the Action Network podcast presented by BetMGM. Enjoy the doubleheader for Monday Night Football and keep an eye out for all of our NFL Week 3 podcasts right here on the Action Network.